everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're going to explore this whole idea of learning from failure.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and we've got some really cool insights from an entrepreneur, author, and speaker named Jason Carter.
Okay.
He was featured on a podcast recently, and he had some interesting perspectives on failure, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he actually calls it his superpower.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. I mean, most people just see it as something...
To avoid.
Yeah, to fear. Yeah, like a big scary monster or something.
Exactly, but he sees it as a teacher,
Okay.
as a source of feedback.
Like that, yeah.
So that's what we're going to unpack today.
Cool.
So in the podcast, Jason, he starts by asking this fundamental question, right? What is failure, really?
Right, get down to the basics.
Yeah, and he doesn't just give you those surface-level definitions,
Like falling short.
Yeah, or making a mistake.
Yeah.
He argues that failure is more multifaceted.
Okay.
So, there's the failing to meet a specific goal, but there's also failing to learn to adapt, to grow from those experiences.
So it's not just about the outcome. It's about how you react.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So he shares this story about starting a tech company in his early 20s
Okay.
that went belly up.
Oh.
Yeah, lost money investors, the whole 9 yards.
Oof, yeah, been there.
Right. And he's honest about how crushing that felt.
I can only imagine.
But I think, we've all had those moments where you felt like we've just hit rock bottom.
Oh, absolutely.
So what was his takeaway from that experience? What was the big lesson he learned?
Well, this is where his thinking gets really interesting.
Okay.
He realized it wasn't the business failing itself that was the real problem. It was how he responded to it.
Okay.
He got stuck in this cycle of blame and self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And that prevented him from seeing those valuable lessons hidden within the failure.
Oh, so he's saying we often get so caught up in the emotional fallout of failure that we miss the opportunity to learn.
Exactly. You're so busy beating ourselves up.
Yeah. We don't stop to ask, okay, what happened here?
Yeah.
What can I learn from this? How can I do better next time?
Right. It's like that saying, experience is the best teacher, but the tuition is high.
Yeah.
It sounds like he figured out a way to lower that tuition a bit.
Absolutely. And he doesn't stop there.
Okay.
He then dives into this story about his first book launch,
Okay.
which, it didn't go as planned.
Oh no, what happened?
Complete flop.
Oh.
Terrible sales, scathing reviews, the whole works. Yeah, he talks about that feeling, of wanting to just crawl into a hole and disappear,
Oh yeah.
which I think we can all relate to.
Totally.
But, instead of giving in to those feelings, he did something pretty courageous.
Okay, now I'm really curious.
He reached out to his harshest critics,
Wow.
the ones who wrote the most negative reviews,
He didn't. Yeah.
and he asked for their feedback.
Wow, that's bold.
It's like actively seeking out the thing that most people try to avoid.
Right, because it's so easy to get defensive when you face criticism.
Yeah,
But it sounds like he saw it as a way to grow.
exactly. And you know what? That feedback, as tough as it was to hear, ended up being invaluable.
Really?
He rewrote and relaunched the book,
Huh.
and it became a bestseller.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so sometimes that most painful feedback
Yeah,
can be the most useful.
that's so true.
Yeah. It's like that old saying, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
That's a good one.
But seriously, it's about having that humility to accept we don't have all the answers.
Right.
And that even our harshest critics might have something valuable to teach us.
Mm-hmm. So this experience with his book launch, it really shaped his perspective on failure.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it sounds like it led him to develop some sort of framework for turning setbacks into opportunities.
You're exactly right. And he lays out 3 key pieces of advice that I think are incredibly powerful. And the first one is all about separating your identity from your failures.
That's so important because it's so easy to internalize those setbacks and let them define us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Failing at something doesn't make you a failure.
Right.
It's a crucial distinction.
Yeah,
We're so much more than our mistakes.
absolutely. Okay, so that's the first piece of advice. What are the other 2?
His second piece of advice is all about reflection.
Okay.
He encourages us to ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? It's about shifting from a mindset of blame and shame
Yeah,
to one of curiosity and learning.
that's a great reframe.
And the third, and perhaps the most important, is to take action.
Okay.
He reminds us that learning from our failures is only valuable if we actually use those lessons to move forward,
Right.
even if it's just a small step.
So it's not enough to just sit there and analyze your failures.
Yeah.
You have to actually do something with those insights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He stresses that action, even imperfect action,
Yeah.
is the key to turning those stumbles into stepping stones.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about taking action, but sometimes the fear of failure can really hold us back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That fear can be paralyzing.
So how does Jason address that in the podcast? Does he talk about that at all?
He does, and he actually uses a really interesting analogy.
Okay.
He says fear of failure is like a shadow monster.
You're a shadow monster.
Yeah, the more you run from it, the bigger and scarier it seems.
Okay.
But if you turn around and face it, if you walk right up to it, you realize it's not as intimidating as you thought.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so true. But how do you actually face that fear? It's easier said than done, right?
Right. And he suggests this idea of failing forward.
Feeling forward.
Yeah. And it's not just a catchy phrase.
Okay.
It's about actively seeking out challenges, even small ones, as a way to build up your, what he calls failure tolerance.
So it's like building up a muscle. The more you expose yourself to failure, the less power it has over you.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
He argues that a lot of the time we actually set ourselves up for failure by aiming for perfection right out of the gate.
That makes sense because we put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right the first time that we become terrified of making any mistakes.
Yeah, he encourages people to embrace imperfection,
Yeah.
to experiment, to try things out and see what happens. He says it's in those messy, imperfect moments that we often discover our greatest breakthroughs.
It's funny, we talk about failure as this negative thing.
Right.
What if it's actually the key to unlocking our full potential?
Interesting thought.
Yeah, what if it's through those stumbles and setbacks that we actually discover who we are and what we're truly capable of?
That ties into something else Jason talks about.
Okay.
The need to kind of shift the narrative around failure.
Okay.
He says, we as a society tend to celebrate success.
Yeah,
But we gloss over all the failures that paved the way to that success.
that's true. We rarely hear about the failed prototypes, the rejected manuscripts, the countless rejections, before someone finally makes it.
Exactly. And he challenges us to start asking different questions. Next time you hear someone's success story, don't just ask about their triumphs.
Okay.
Ask about the failures that shaped their journey. Ask about the lessons they learned from those experiences.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, it humanizes success and reminds us that everyone, even the most successful people,
Yeah.
face setbacks along the way.
Right. And he even goes so far as to say that we should actually celebrate failure.
To celebrate failure.
Yeah, not just tolerate it.
Wow, that's a radical concept.
I know.
But he argues that by normalizing failure, by acknowledging it as an essential part of the journey, we create a more supportive and encouraging environment for growth and innovation.
I love that.
Yeah.
Instead of fearing failure, we can see it as a badge of honor.
Right.
A sign that we're pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones and striving for something greater.
Absolutely, and I think that's where this idea of failing forward comes full circle.
Okay.
It's not just about learning from our mistakes. It's about embracing them as stepping stones, as catalysts for growth, as opportunities to discover new possibilities that we might have never considered before.
It's almost like those failures become invisible, hidden beneath the surface of achievement.
Yeah,
But they're there, shaping the path to success in ways we often don't acknowledge.
it's true.
Yeah, it really is remarkable when you think about how those stumbles and setbacks can actually lead to some of our greatest achievements.
They're like hidden ingredients.
In the recipe for success.
Yeah, we may not want to acknowledge them, but they add depth and complexity to the final product.
That's a great way to put it. And Jason calls it failing forward. And that concept has really stuck with me. It's so empowering. It takes the shame and stigma out of failure and turns it into a stepping stone to success.
And it's not just a feel-good concept either. He offers some really practical advice on how to put this into practice.
Right, like separating our identity from our failures and
Yeah.
reflecting on the lessons we can learn and then taking action. But how do you actually get past that initial fear of failure? How do we embrace those setbacks as learning opportunities?
He says it's about changing the narrative.
Okay.
We need to move away from this idea that failure is the opposite of success,
Okay.
and instead start celebrating the effort, the resilience, the willingness to get back up and try again, even when things don't go as planned.
Yeah, I love that. Imagine a world where we celebrate the attempts, the experiments, the quote-unquote failures, as much as we celebrate the successes.
It would be a much more encouraging and supportive world, wouldn't it?
Totally. And it would also foster innovation and creativity because people would feel safe to take risks, to step outside their comfort zones, knowing that even if they stumble, they'll be met with support and encouragement, not judgment and shame.
Absolutely.
So it's about shifting our perspective, from seeing failure as a sign of weakness to seeing it as a sign of courage, a testament to our willingness to push ourselves beyond our limits and strive for something more.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about avoiding failure altogether. It's about learning to fail forward.
Right.
To extract those valuable lessons and use them to fuel our growth and ultimately achieve our goals.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jason Carter's insights on failure, I want to leave you with this thought-provoking question.
Okay.
What's one failure in your life that, looking back, you can now see as a valuable stepping stone? Maybe it's a business venture that didn't pan out, or a relationship that ended, or a project that just completely flopped.
Take some time to reflect on that.
Yeah, think about it.
You might be surprised at the insights you uncover and the power you find in reframing those past experiences.
Remember, failure is not the end, it's just the beginning. And who knows, maybe that failure was the catalyst for something truly amazing, something you never could have imagined without taking that detour. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.